Nahum before we go to prayer. Nahum chapter number 2. Nahum chapter number 2. Nahum. Still an interesting little book this is. It's tucked away in the pages of Scripture. Doesn't take up too many pages, just 2 and a bit. Nahum, though, we're in chapter number 2 this evening as we work our way through the minor prophets, one chapter at a time here on a Wednesday evening. Chapter 2 verse 1 says, "He that dasheth in pieces is come up before thy face. Keep the munition, watch the way, make thy loins strong, fortify thy power mightily. For the Lord hath turned away the excellency of Jacob as the excellency of Israel. For the emptiers have emptied them out and marred their vine branches. The shield of his mighty men is made red, the valiant men are in scarlet. The chariots shall be with flaming torches in the day of his preparation, and the fir trees shall be terribly shaken. The chariots shall rage in the streets. They shall justle one against another in the broad ways. They shall seem like torches. They shall run like the lightnings. He shall recount his worthies. They shall stumble in their walk. They shall make haste to the wall thereof, and the defense shall be prepared. The gates of the rivers shall be opened, and the palace shall be dissolved. As Huzzab shall be led away captive, she shall be brought up, and her maids shall lead her, as with the voice of doves tabering upon their breasts. But Nineveh is of old like a pool of water, yet they shall flee away. Stand, stand, shall they cry, but none shall look back. Take ye the spoil of silver, take the spoil of gold, for there is none end of the store and glory out of all the pleasant furniture. She is empty, and void, and waste. And the heart melteth, and the knees smite together, and much pain is in all loins, and the faces of them all gather blackness. Where is the dwelling of the lions, and the feeding place of the young lions, where the lion and even the old lion walked, and the lions whelped, and none made them afraid? The lion did tear in pieces enough for his whelps, and strangled for his lionesses, and filled his holes with prey, and his dens with raven. Behold, I am against thee, saith the Lord of hosts, and I will burn her chariots in the smoke, and the sword shall devour thy young lions, and I will cut off thy prey from the earth, and the voice of the messenger shall no more be heard." There you go. That's it. Doesn't that just bless your socks? Nahum chapter number 2. Interesting, isn't it? It's not one that you read very often, Nahum. And if we haven't read it now, maybe some of you, it's the first time you've ever maybe read this chapter or had any time in this chapter or even in this book. Last week might have been the first time you've spent time in this book and had any look in any seriousness in it. Anything in this chapter that stands out? Any observations or anything? You're reading it again. What did I just read? What did we just read? What is going on here? Here's a very brief, simple outline for the book of Nahum. So Nahum, the prophecy is against Nineveh. It's the city of Nineveh specifically, which is the capital city, the main city of the Assyrians. The Assyrians are a mighty people that go all the way back to the very earliest parts of after the flood, and they built that civilization there. Chapter 1 has to do with judgment declared, and God declares judgment against the Ninevites because of their sin, because of their idolatry, because of their wickedness, and because of who God is, and it's rooted in his character. His judgment is rooted in his character. So chapter 1 is judgment declared. Chapter 2 is judgment described. It's what the overthrow of Nineveh is going to look like. And in chapter number 3, judgment defended. that he defends why he did what he did and why he allows to come to pass what he comes to pass. Now, in that thought and in that thinking of chapter number 2 being judgment described, what you are reading and what we are reading seems to be the overthrow of Nineveh and what it would be like in the day that Nineveh is overthrown. Now, remember, Nineveh in their day was the glorious city, wonderful city, massive big city that had centuries of history and legacies and mighty kings, and they ruled at times the length of the Assyrian army, the Assyrian Empire. They ruled through what is modern day Turkey, and they ruled around Syria, modern day Syria, and around Iran, and through ancient Persia. They ruled down even as far down into Egypt and even into Israel at times as well. They had a very expansive empire, and they probably thought in their day, there is nobody that'll ever defeat us as a kingdom, as a people, as a city. We are too great, we're too mighty, we're too powerful. And here we are reading, God says, again, I'm actually going to bring you down. Your wickedness is going to come to an end. It was ultimately the Babylonians, the Chaldeans and the Medes that came along and defeated the Assyrians and got together and said, we're going to take them out. And they took them out. It was Nebuchadnezzar's father that overthrew Nineveh with the Medes and destroyed them and set up the Babylonian Empire that Nebuchadnezzar then starts to rule later on. And we read much about that when he went in and destroyed Jerusalem. But you read this about, if you read chapter number 2 in the light that it's judgment described, how it's actually going to happen. They're dashed in pieces in verse 1. They ought to keep the munitions and keep the watch, make the loins strong, fortify the palaces. He says, get ready because the enemy's coming and destruction is coming. He then goes on to say that the shields of his mighty men is made red. The valiant men are in scarlet in verse 3. The flaming torches and the day of preparation, the fir trees shall terribly shake. The shaking, if you look in the later on in the Bible, the shaking, God has to do with shakings. He says he's going to bring a great shaking. And it means it's earthquakes and an upheaval of the current system of things. And God knows how to shake things up. And he is going to shake things up with the Assyrians, a great terrible shaking of a tree. It's like, remember which is the one where it talks about the fruit, the ripe fruit, that the judgment of God has come to its ripe fruit, ready to be harvested. And I can't remember which minor prophet it is now that was using that analogy, but the fruit is ripe and he's going to shake the tree and it's going to bring forth the harvest. And he's saying that the fruit is ripe and your sin has come up before me and God is going to shake the tree here and bring forth the harvest of their sin. And the chariots are going to rage in the streets, and so the enemy is going to come in and be in the streets and running over things. It says in verse 5, he shall recount the worthies. They shall stumble in their walk. They shall make haste to the wall thereof, and the defenses shall be prepared. It's like there's going to be the battle cry. It's going to be crying out, the enemy's coming, quick, run, get to your places, every man to his station. Verse 6 is interesting, that the gates of the river shall be opened and the palaces shall be dissolved. If you read about Nineveh and you read about the siege and the battle and the defeat ultimately of Nineveh, and you can read this in secular history, there seems to have been a flooding of the Euphrates at that particular time that played into the hands of the invading armies, which is what Nahum prophesies years before it ever happened, that the gates of the rivers shall be opened and the palace shall be dissolved. And in verse 9 it says, take ye the spoil of the silver, take the spoil of the gold, for there is none end of store, and the glory out of all the pleasance. I mean, they are going to be ransacked. God is going to bring a complete, utter destruction to Nineveh because of their sin. And verse 10 says, she is empty, she's void, she's waste. Their hearts are going to melt, the knees are going to smite together, and much pain is in the loins. Verse 8, sorry, I missed past verse 8 where it says that the second part of verse 8, they're going to cry. This is what they're going to cry. The men are going to be shaking. The army is going to come in and the soldiers are going to be there standing, quivering, shaking about they're going to lose. and those that are defending Nineveh are going to flee. And it's like the generals are saying, stand your positions, stand, don't run, stand. He says, stand, stand, shall they cry, but none shall look back. In that day, he's going to bring such victory over Nineveh that they will flee. The inhabitants of Nineveh shall flee. And God says in verse 13, behold, I am against thee, saith the Lord of hosts. I will burn her chariots in the smoke. The sword shall devour thy young lions, and I will cut off thy prey from the earth, and the voice of thy messenger shall not be heard. And I think that's the key verse to this particular chapter, is it doesn't matter how great you are, how long of a history you've had. It doesn't matter who has been your kings, what pedigree you have, how expansive your empire has been. But if the Lord is against you, that's it. When the Lord is against you, and he says, behold, I am against thee, saith the Lord of hosts. We sang a song tonight, and I couldn't help but think along these same lines, where the roses never fade. And we're going to a city where the roses never fade. But the idea of the city, and I've only realized that this year, going through Genesis and thinking it through, that the idea of cities are so central to the Bible that the cities of men is what God ultimately destroys. Nineveh is a city, and he destroys the city of Nineveh. Babylon is a city, and Babylon is destroyed as a city. Babel, the origin of Babylon, is a city that God destroyed. The cities of Samaria that Abraham was called out of, and he is called out of the cities to a city that God would build. And so you have these idea of cities all the way through. Jerusalem is supposedly set up as the godly city, the city of God, and you have these cities. But this city, this Nahum, is about a city that says, right, we're going to set ourselves up in opposition to God. We're not going to serve the one true God. We're going to serve ourselves, and we're going to serve our own intents and purposes. And God ultimately brings destruction to the cities of men in distinction to the city that he sets up and that he will make. And the cities and the kingdoms of men will always fail and fade away. And I think the older you get, or hopefully the older you get, the more you realize that the things of this world really are worthless. They're actually not the value that you think are in them. And some people haven't learnt this. Even aged men who know not God are still trying to grasp the things of this world, trying to keep their own kingdom, their wealth, their money, their houses, their business, their careers, their name, the things attached to this world. But it's like trying to grab sand and it just goes through the fingers. It's actually, it's worthless. And to think that some people, and this is what they realize, man, death is coming up and all of this stuff is going to be left behind and it's worthless and empty, and it's nothing. And that's the kingdoms of this world, that everything that man tries to establish and claim and say, this has value, it actually has no value at all. In the whole scheme of things, it has no value, for when you die, you leave it all behind. God is saying, right, but I'm offering to you something that has value. Serve me, and the promises that I give to you and the promises that I will follow through with, they are everlasting. They are eternal. There is hope. There is joy. There is worth in the promises that I give. Follow me and I will bless you for your faith. It's this clear sort of idea through the Bible that's not, again, just a little isolated thought. It's from Genesis all the way through to Revelation. Man builds kingdoms to his own glory and for his own lusts, but God says, right, if you have faith, I'll give you a better kingdom, a better city than you can ever imagine. Greater than Nineveh, greater than Babylon, greater than Babel, greater than the New Yorks and the Parises and the Londons and the Shanghais of our world, greater than any city you can come up with today. God says, I have a better city, enduring, eternal, lasting, where the roses never fade. And no enemy is going to come in and destroy, and the sounds of the chariots will never be in those streets. And no one will say, get to the walls, we're under attack. Every man stand their position. Never will it be like in that city like that. Never. It's a city of peace. And great thoughts here tonight. But the kingdoms again, the kingdoms of man and the cities of men and their emptiness and their wickedness, God ultimately will destroy, no matter how great and glorious are their heydays. It still will crumble and it will still be ruined. And Nineveh, a once great, thriving city, is now nothing but ruins in Mosul. I think it's in Mosul. Mosul, Iraq is where you can go and you will just see crumbly ruins of a once great civilization that nobody really cares about today. It's just a crumbled ruin. That's the glory of man. That's the end glory of man. It's nothingness. It's just sand, what it turns into. I'm going to leave it off there, and we'll look at chapter 3 next week. But we're going to break up into some groups to pray. So find a prayer partner or